Hey there, all you fans of the Freaky Deaky. Welcome back to Chills and Thrills, your favorite TV radio broadcast covering what's new, gnarly, and horror films. As always, my name is Harper Cullen Rowe, your favorite film critic slash host, and today we've got a very special episode. That's right, folks, it's our annual look back at a year in horror. The year is 1974. And I'm going to give you the skinny on the most influential horror films that came out this year. There was some real nightmares. I'm talking about Black Christmas, Death Dream, and of course, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. First up though, we'll be diving into the work of scholar Judith Hess Wright in her 1974 article, Genre Films as Status Quo. Wright argues, in her opinion, that horror films have a tendency to present people as prey to uncontrollable evil impulses, and it is only by reliance on traditional beliefs and the domination of a well-defined upper class can we be saved from doom and perdition in the simple narratives of horror films. Wright explains that the horror film deals with the conflict between the rational/scientific and traditional ways of problem solving. Now, I'm going to disagree with her a bit here, as I think one of the defining traits of movies in 1974 is a break away from tradition and an introduction of a sort of new subverting of expectations. I believe the new works of this year, which had yet to be taken into account by this article at the time it was released, actively work to subvert this expectation that she defines in order to transform the genre. While it is true that the horror movies of this year, people are turned into prey, as she states, more often than not by a crazed killer, traditional beliefs are far from the savior and are in fact the downfall of the youth in many cases. In Death Dream, which has been released in 1974, the traditional methods of problem solving are having veterans who return from war suppress or repress their experiences and quickly move on, as the expectation is that they will return to normal in an efficient manner. But these methods are entirely ineffective in helping the main character of Death Dream, Andy, returned as a zombie-like creature after dying in the Vietnam War. It becomes obvious that in the new aftermath of this war, unlike any other we've seen, the old methods of coping are ineffective. And a generational gap begins to form between the father and son. Conservative and traditional views of the father do nothing to improve the situation. Now, of course, when it comes with a break from tradition, we have to discuss the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is a break from tradition in every way possible, with its extreme showcasing of gore and unconventional use of daylight shots. Here in this movie, we have new-age teenagers on a road trip through Texas, and they are viciously murdered in cold blood by a strange pseudo-family of Texas local killers. Here the expectation is subverted by having the somewhat symbolic traditional family unit manifest in the evil that is depicted in the movie, and especially prevalent in a scene where the pseudo-family eats a cannibalistic dinner together. Here, have a look at this clip.
Like a pack of hounds. We were just having fun. You think this is a party?
Please. You can make him stop. No shit.
Shut your mouth. Can't be helped, young lady.
Please.
Shut up.
Kill me.
Don't mind.
Oof, that scene. What a nightmare. Now, this scene, this traditional dinner of sorts, is the closest the movie comes to showcasing something familiar to tradition, but these familial-like traditions are being undertaken by a cannibalistic family of killers. And it's very disturbing and actively goes against Wright's statement that tradition serves as the savior in horror films to bring the film back to status quo. In fact, this return to status quo, she states, has been typical of the horror genre previous to 1974, is subverted within this film. Another break from tradition is, of course, Black Christmas, as it is a horror movie set at Christmas and actively using that lovely backdrop of bright colors. Tonally, very different from what we've seen in the past. In fact, this return to status quo that has been so typical of the horror genre in previous years is nowhere to be found within the year 1974, as in the 3 movies I mentioned, none of them depict that return to status quo at the end. In Death Dream, you have the death of a son. In the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you have a sole survivor that escapes, but the killers escape as well. There is no return to justice or return to a normalized status quo. And in Black Christmas, the killer gets away and the main character presumably is killed by him. These endings sort of go to represent the status of America in not viewing a return to status quo as necessarily within reach or easily solvable. These problems are very complex and cannot be easily resolved or broken beyond the point where we can return to normalcy. Now, moving on to the second topic of focus for the films from 1974, it has been said that horror can often reflect the time period it is in. Now, looking at a cultural analysis of America through the lens of 1974 horror movies, we have this very helpful interview of Tobe Hooper, the director of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, in which he talks about how Texas Chainsaw Massacre is his view of a representation of current America. Have a look.
And part of the film's inspiration came from their news, and it was so graphic. I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, it was like car accidents and the aftermath. You know, the camera moving across brains and bones and it was during a period of time in the country where we ran out of gas. It was that gas shortage where people lined up, and so that Watergate was going down. There was a lot of political things that were just happening in the country that was inspired, that just helped fix the film. As I think what I was trying to say is, now this is America. This is my view right now. I should qualify it of America.
Now, if you didn't know, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a movie that was independently produced, meaning that there was no big budget studio backing this low budget event. This means that the director has a lot more freedom in what they can necessarily say, as he blatantly states here that Texas Chainsaw Massacre is his view of current America. Very bold and potentially controversial statement. Although, if you look at the status of America, this is a very common viewpoint, in that we're facing the aftermath of things like Watergate, as he states, the aftermath of the Vietnam War currently, and these critiques of American culture, this sort of representation of the chaos demonstrated in his movie, in his own view, reflects the current status of America. There's also this element of mistrust, sort of loneliness and lost nature between neighbors. We see these 5 teenagers just sort of wandering the country aimlessly. And we see the death of the youth. And this is something we've been very familiar with recently, so I found it very relevant. Finally, we look at the work of Philippe Ayres, whose 1974 article explores contemporary attitudes and cultural perceptions of death in contrast to the past. This is especially relevant to the horror genre and how movies are either affirmed or actively go against attitudes towards death. Ayres argues that in the Western world, over time, death has become more individualized, more feared, something to be postponed and hidden from view, as in contrast to previous views of death. Ayres suggests that in our current day and age, there's an absence of past rituals surrounding death. People are instead left to confront death in isolation. Well, folks, confronting death in isolation is in fact the name of the game in horror films, especially ones from this year. Take Black Christmas, for example. Each character faces the killer alone, and for those whose bodies are never discovered, it's as if they never really died at all to their family and friends. We see in this film that there is the most individualized and most feared experience of death. to be attacked by a killer in your own home alone, and for no one to hear you or no one to discover your body. This is hidden from the view to be extreme, emphasizing current views of death and fears surrounding death in our Western world and our modern age. Well, that's all I have for you today. In the meantime, I hope you have a very happy new year, headed into 1975 soon, and I'll catch you on the flip side, and oh, don't forget to stay spooky.